Hello, and welcome to Locutors of Trek, Supplemental, the podcast where we talk about the people, places, and things of Star Trek. So, grab yourself a Gorn Marador or an Aldebaran whiskey, and join us, far beyond the stars.
Locutors of Trek.
Program initiated. Enter when ready.
Well, hi there. Welcome back. This is a supplemental episode of Locutors of Trek. I'm Dave.
And I'm Davan.
We are plain simple Tailors.
And the Locutors of Trek.
Indeed. We go by many names. There are some who called me Tim.
Who calls you Tim?
No one.
Oh.
It's a Monty Python joke.
Oh.
Tim the Enchanter. Capew, capew.
I should have known whenever I don't know what you're talking about, it's a Monty Python joke.
Pretty much.
I mean, I like Monty
That's
Python.
kind of how I survived my teen years.
Yeah, this episode is about Captain Kathryn Janeway, with a bit of a thesis, perhaps in hand.
Whereas once I brought a kaleidoscope to make an offering, this time Davan has brought a multifaceted and interesting argument about Captain Kathryn Janeway.
Actually, first, we should familiarize ourselves with the good captain.
All right.
Captain Kathryn Janeway was born in the year 2335 in Bloomington, Indiana.
Where there is currently a statue of her. Whoa. Dude.
Bloomington, home of the Janeway statue.
It's true. I'm sure it was interesting before that, but now it's got
to
a Janeway
parents,
statue.
Vice Admiral, which must be his first name, and Gretchen Janeway. Good old VA, they probably call it.
VA Janeway.
Yeah, the old VA Janeway. She enjoyed math and science.
Lifelong pursuits.
And pursued that when she joined Starfleet Academy. She was also very interested in tennis. However, she quit for 19 years after losing a match.
Yeah, she didn't deal with that kind of setback too easily at that age.
Yes. Now, that brings me to my thesis a little bit. Captain Janeway manages to almost do the impossible and excel beyond anyone at Starfleet and her own probably expectations. And you can see that as compared to Captain Ransom, for example, of the Equinox.
Sure.
Who was a command officer himself, and perhaps a more natural one than Janeway, which is the other part of my thesis. Another part of my thesis here is Captain Janeway doesn't seem to me, as we'll get into as we talk about her life, a natural command officer, and indeed that wasn't her trajectory going into Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
She was steering herself toward probably the chief science officer of a vessel, maybe captain of a science vessel or something, but certainly command wasn't her focus. And indeed, quitting tennis after losing once doesn't seem to be the behavior of a natural captain. For example, Jean-Luc Picard and Benjamin Sisko don't quit anything even when they should, like fighting
Nausicaans or Vulcans?
Nausicaans or Vulcans while intoxicated, yeah.
Yeah, Janeway doesn't strike me as a person who would pick that bar fight.
She would think of 100 other better things to do with that situation. So again, I don't want my thesis to sound like a slight on Janeway, because it's not. It actually, I think, is just she starts on a shakier foundation and then excels greatly despite that foundation. And perhaps even greater than someone who had an easier ride or was more a natural commander, like perhaps Ransom was. He seemed like your standard kind of commander, Starfleet kind of commander guy, like your Rikers and your Jean-Luc Picards even.
Well, and there's got to be some kind of idea formed in the likeness of, Garth of Axanar and James Kirk and Pike and I've lost her name, but the brilliant captain of the Enterprise C and who sacrifices herself at Narendra 3, of course.
Garrett?
I
think
think
Captain Garrett.
Rachel Garrett, I think maybe.
Yeah.
There's a number of great captains who both tend to go down swinging, tend to have a certain, what is that Vulcan phrase for it? Cowboy diplomacy about them.
Cowboy diplomacy, yes.
And even though Janeway ends up perhaps being the most
Quite the cowboy
cowpokey of a
herself.
person that we see as a captain in terms of really being out there in the wilds.
Yeah.
At least
good
from a
analogy
human
for her.
perspective. Yeah, I think I think I'm starting to see where this argument could go, and I'm digging it.
Well, let me see if I can form it a little more. here.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what you do with this.
So, she graduates Starfleet Academy. So she does a command assignment test. So this is her first shot at seeing what her command potential is. Likely early on in Starfleet, because they like to start to steer you early on. And she does very poorly on this test because she has very bad adherence to tactical protocol. And gets dressed down by Tuvok, who was actually in charge of the test at the time. He was
It's
teaching
interesting.
he was teaching at the academy.
All of a sudden, I'm kind of picking up resonances of Mariner here.
Mariner,
Well,
and
with
also
Mariner, I suppose.
the Kirk-Spock relationship in the new JJ in the
Sure.
2009 movie, where they basically meet by Spock telling Kirk how he sucks at the test.
Oh,
And
that's true.
That's how Janeway meets her Vulcan as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
He's the Vulcan.
Yeah. But eventually she realized he was correct, in fact. So I'm sure respected him because of it.
Well, and that's somewhat both friend, confidant, but mentoring relationship.
Yeah, he starts off a bit of a mentor of her, which is quite interesting.
Persists with them for a long time. And I mean, he'd be what? When he meets her, because she's... I'm jumping ahead just gently to assess age. I think by the time we meet her in the pilot of Voyager...
That's 2371.
Yeah, she'd be about 42, 43 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
And Tuvok by that point, I think, is closing on 100.
Yeah.
He's been in and out of Starfleet. He's been a lot of things by then.
Well, he served with Sulu.
Yeah,
on,
exactly.
Excelsior.
So he's been on there a long time. And
Now, I do believe he was like early 20s when he was on the Excelsior.
I think it was an early assignment for him, yeah. And that would make sense. I mean, again, about 80 years ago.
Yeah.
Relative to the sort of Voyager present. Yeah, so his relationship, and I wonder to what degree that isn't something Vulcans do with humans as well, that they kind of adopt a human
It seems like they do.
that they kind of can resonate with and guide.
Well, Sarek adopted a world, sort of.
Absolutely. And for the most logical and sort of mystically rational of creatures that Vulcans are, in the words of Plotinus in the 3rd century here on Earth.
Oh, Dead Friends.
Yeah, he talks about seeing someone through whom you can see the good or the true or the beautiful. And making it a point to have a relationship with that person in your life. In that case, he's specifically talking about when and why you should pursue erotic relationships with someone. But he also says this is a characteristic of friendship and all sorts of other things. But certainly don't pursue eros with anybody if that's not at least a component of this relationship, right? And I can see Tuvok as noticing that same sort of
Potential.
quality in Janeway, not in an erotic way at all, but in a sense of a very deep,
Well, it's like he says.
deep friendship.
He says her methods are unorthodox, but he's learned to trust her instinct.
Yes,
Because he doesn't have that instinct, but he sees how hers works, and he probably finds it fascinating and probably not very logical how often it works. He's like, this doesn't really make sense, but it keeps working. I have to see what happens here. I have to keep studying this.
Statistically, I know this is going to turn out better more often than not.
Yeah.
Then it's going to go bad.
And they never seem to really give up entirely on that mentor relationship.
No. I think she appreciates his wisdom always. But she's a captain who's really willing to do that with her crew as well. Even though she keeps a distance, she really reaches to them for what she knows they can bring to the table. And I really like that about her way as a captain as well.
And it does seem to me that part of the relationship is sort of taken over by Chakotay at some point, where as her kind of main confidant and the person she needs to feel validated by.
Sure. Anyway, back to her life story. Or introduction.
Well, she in the second year of the academy, she started drinking coffee.
Another important relationship.
So she could stay up and study all the time, as we see her do a lot on Voyager. We always see her studying things, like just reading pads and reading. Like she always comes in. Usually the officers come in and inform the captain. It works the other way on Voyager. The officers come in and Janeway tells them everything that she just read. Like,
Yes.
like Jean-Luc Picard said, in their singular state, the Borg are utterly without mercy. I love that scene, and Chakotay starts laughing at her. She's like, what? He's like, you're doing a pretty good Picard right now. You should see Ensign whatever's Janeway. She's like, what? Impersonating the captain. Got to be some sort of regulation about it.
Picard's quite an impressionist himself, as we've noted before. But
Talking and talking, and one incredibly unbroken. But yeah, we don't have time for a Vastbender speech.
Nope.
This is a supplemental. So in the third year, she went to Owen Paris, father of Tom Paris,
Okay.
to consult him about her thesis. Not sure what that was, but I assume it's in quantum cosmology because that's what her major that she graduates in.
right.
Cool.
So hard direction toward the sciences right now in her life.
And just like quantum cosmology, like she must have gone, like this is where I think one of the reasons she may have excelled so much despite like the shaky foundation I'm going to try to paint here. Because she's a quantum cosmologist. The theories and like phenomena and things that she knows of or has theorized about that are going through her head all the time. She must have been, at least in the early beginning, as she seemed to be, pretty optimistic that she could get them home earlier.
Yeah.
Like the complexity and the randomness of the universe, she would be more aware of than any captain we've seen.
And it makes a good deal of sense out of her interest in exploring anomalies as they come across them. Because in a certain sense, I could also see a more conservative move of saying, okay, anomaly, we're just going to head straight for that big pile of hydrogen and pick it up with our Bassard collector and keep right on going.
Yep.
Anomalies, we have
Study
no
it as
time
we go.
for that. Exactly. But, you know, her, I can see what you're saying there.
Here's a question for you, Dave.
Okay.
Who's the chief science officer of the Starship Voyager?
Oh, my gosh.
Should be an easy question, shouldn't it? If I asked you that about any other ship, you'd tell me.
Absolutely. I mean, my instinct is to say that, like, that role on the bridge is played by a mixture of Harry, Kim, and Tuvok.
Harry's more
But
doing
in a
ops.
certain way, it really is Janeway.
It's Janeway.
Yeah,
I
that's
think it's
interesting.
Janeway.
Because she's got all those displays on her
Like she makes the
captain's
science
chair,
plan and then she delegates it to Harry and B'Elanna, and
That's
but-
true. That's true.
And I find that very interesting. She never gave up her like chief. She doesn't assign a chief science officer. Isn't that strange?
That is very
You're lost
interesting.
in a new quadrant and you don't have a chief science officer. Now maybe she had one and he died in that initial caretaker thing or something. Who knows?
A whole batch of people
But
did.
didn't replace them.
Yeah, it's true.
I think she wanted that role for herself. She certainly is the most, decorated probably scientist.
Well, and it raises an interesting question for me. You know, given that Federation ships have widely differing mission profiles and mandates and individual missions within that, you know, not just by ship class and that sort of thing, but by specific assignment, I wonder to what degree, from job to job, a captain would be able to redefine basically their job description. You know, so when
Do you think Picard's, for example's job description on the Stargazer was a different job description than on...
and it
Yeah,
may well
Enterprise.
have been, right? His duties may have been quite
Well, they would
different.
be. He's on the flagship. That's a bad example, probably. But
But I think, honestly, it's a pretty decent example. Going from a Constellation class to not just a Galaxy, but the Enterprise D is a huge step up. Or
it's
whatever
not the
ship
same
was in
job. It's
between.
definitely not the same job.
But he has a lot more diplomatic
Yeah.
functions. He's got a lot more having. He has to deal with children.
True. Maybe that was her thing. She's like, I'll captain your ship, but I'm the chief science officer as well.
Right?
Who knows?
Like I want to be able to.
Because she does want to make those decisions,
Yep.
as I'm about to discuss. So, and Paris was impressed by her. And she also marries while in the academy an officer who's already a Lieutenant Justin Ty.
Okay.
And she marries him, and they serve together. Or at least, I suspect he's a science officer as well, because they do science together.
Okay.
In 2357, she graduates, major in quantum cosmology, and she's promoted to ensign right away. And she serves under Paris on the Albatani.
Okay. Just a second. I'm going to pull up the Albatani because I always love to know what ship class these things are.
Well, it's interesting that they didn't call it the Abu Abd Allah Muhammad ibn Jabir ibn Sinan al-Raqi al-Harani al-Sabi al-Batani.
Well, it is a bit of
Because they do the full USS Thomas Paine.
That's true. I mean, that name would have made it a considerable distance further around the front saucer.
It would have to wrap
Excelsior
around,
class.
I guess, wouldn't it?
Even though this is an Excelsior class ship. So
The
she's serving on
USS, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a mouthful, but,
Yeah.
would have been interesting.
Beautiful
But of
nod
course,
to
an
the,
astronomer.
to the many naming
Syrian
traditions
astronomer.
of Earth. Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
she's there as
on
a science officer.
She's there as a junior science officer.
Right.
Yep. The Albatani is sent to the Arias sector on the Arias expedition.
Mm-hmm.
But they get sucked into the Cardassian border wars because they're close to that, I guess.
Right.
And she's taken captive by the Cardassians.
Yikes.
So she's just an ensign. This is kind of her first mission out there, and she's already taken captive. But she escapes with the help of her fiancé Ty. I'm not sure how that all worked. I didn't read that book. But she's awarded or decorated for her heroism.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2358, herself, her father, V.A. Janeway,
VA. Good old VA.
good old V.A., and Lieutenant Ty
Mm-hmm.
are testing out the USS Terra Nova, an experimental vessel.
Okay.
And they crash under the ice caps. And only Kathryn escapes with her life. So now she's had her first kind of Starfleet mission, and she's taken captive. She does her first science project, essentially. And she loses her father and her fiancé.
This is a brutal way to come up.
Pretty bad.
Very hard.
Yeah, not good. So she's paging counselor to Captain Maxwell. Janeway takes a year off after she loses her family.
And that's a pretty reasonable move, honestly.
Clearly her ship had a counselor, unlike the Phoenix, was it? Maxwell's ship?
Yeah.
Yeah,
a counselor that was willing to engage trauma.
Or she just may have decided. She's pretty self-reflective
self-aware.
kind of person, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's terrible.
And I mean, she also does have, she has a tendency to seclusion when in deep pain.
Mm-hmm.
Even or even when in deep reflection. When she goes to spend time with Da Vinci in the holodeck, in a certain sense, that's a kind of retreat time.
Yeah.
And so that would make sense for her to take time away and take time to just like heal. Seems pretty reasonable to me, especially after pretty brutal experiences over those last 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So not a good start.
Man, that's a hard career already.
And then she switches to command when she comes back, under the suggestion of Owen Paris.
Okay.
He's trying to push her in that direction, and I think she went with that back to my thesis again. She wants to be the one to stop all of these bad things from happening that keep happening.
So in a certain sense, a feeling of responsibility inside of her, which would be natural in the case of survivorship and that sort of thing.
Yeah, survivor guilt and
becomes channeled into seeking a way to have that responsibility in a realistic fashion.
yeah,
In the sense of like, well, I'm going to place myself in a position where I can be responsible for trying to take actions that I wish could happen in some cases, or could have happened,
or would have been taken before.
Sure. Yeah. Again, even though you can just hear the cries of the deep hurt in that, it's also a really rational approach.
Yeah, she's trying to confront the things about herself that she probably doesn't think she's that good at or doesn't have any experience in.
And probably at this point are really daunting. Even though in some sense I can also see it
Yeah, after that start, it's
Yeah.
But she's probably trying to do a fresh start too, just trying to refresh everything
I can
about
see
her
that.
life that she can and still stay in Starfleet.
Yeah.
So then, she serves aboard the USS Mary Kingsley under a friend of your friend, the Bolian guy,
Oh yeah.
the great
Captain
Ono
Ricks.
Karapletes, who we hear about in that TNG episode, who
That's
was
right.
killed by the parasitic bug conspiracy. A Cretassin captain, who, as we've seen in Enterprise,
That's right. The Enterprise
are very, very concerned with protocol, which is so interesting because Janeway has proven to be bad at protocol thus far in her career. And they put her with a Kreetassen. Not by accident, I don't think. Again, though, she gets to confront something she's maybe not good at. She's not good at language. She's good at...
She's not great at learning verbal
languages, but she's good at... so again, good to work with a Kreetassen. She's good at American Sign Language and non-verbal gestures. But she did fail Klingon.
Yeah, did great in sign language and things, but not so much at that. Hakulea class, what the Mary Kingsley is.
I'm not familiar with that class.
Nor I particularly.
So again, Janeway could have maybe taken that as another loss. She served with this Ono Karapletes as her captain for, I think, about 3 years. About 2 years.
If you think of an Excelsior with underslung nacelles, that's very much what a underslung nacelles and the engineering hull coming almost sort of straight off the back.
Okay. Sounds like a nice ship.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
And then I don't know if she stopped serving with Ono Karapletes because Ono Karapletes was killed. But again, that's another loss for Janeway. She's now lost a captain.
2364, I think. 2362, 2363.
Okay, so that would be after. But
yeah.
Okay. So then in 2363, she's made commander, not captain, but she is the captain. But she's the rank of commander. And she's made captain of the Billings. USS Billings.
So I think an Oberth class, isn't it?
I think it is an Oberth. Makes sense for a science captain.
Yep. And for a first solo command, it's a relatively small ship. It's going to have relatively... I can see that being...
Not the craziest missions.
Yeah,
So
precisely.
then they're sent on surveys, and she's sent to survey a volcanic moon. And she sends down her away team, and there's an eruption, and the away team is badly injured. And, of course, Janeway being Janeway, that's just another bad thing happening in her Starfleet career. And this time, she was in command. So what she does, because this is what she had wished she
I
had...
apologize. The Billings is a constellation class.
Oh, it's a constellation
apologize.
class. Okay.
But anyway.
It's still a nice ship.
Yep.
So then she goes down and completes the mission herself, as we hear from Tuvok, and he says that's the only other time he's seen her like she was acting in the episode Night. He and Chakotay are talking about that.
Night's a very important episode. We should return to that.
We should.
In a little bit.
Yep. And then after that, she is given the command of the USS Bonistel for a 6-month Beta Quadrant exploratory mission. So this seems to be like her kind of final...
The Oberth class.
That's the Oberth class, the Bonistel. Okay, very good. So
Also participated in the Battle of Wolf 359.
Did it?
Yep.
The Bonistel.
Yep.
I wonder if she was captain. No, she wouldn't have been. No, maybe. Jeez.
I don't know. Wouldn't that be crazy? Lost the Bonistel at Wolf 359.
Jeez, wouldn't that be something?
It's a heck of a... I mean, that's a very...
But I don't get the impression that happened.
I don't think so.
Because she's called in for a review after the mission was completed, so she completes that mission.
Oh, so she's off it by the time that...
Yeah, it looks like it. She's called in for a review, and Ensign Tuvok... Oh, on the Bonistel, actually, I should say, Tuvok was assigned to be her tactical officer and to stop her from breaking protocols.
Okay.
Which I think she'd be okay with, actually. I don't think to her that would feel as much like chaperone as it may seem.
I can see that being
I think that's why they chose
Starfleet's implication.
Yes, I think
that we're going to give you somebody to keep an eye on you, but...
And this is her last big test before maybe getting the captaincy.
Sure. But really, they're trying to set conditions for success here.
Yes. Yeah, they're trying to set her up for success for sure. And she's a bit of a difficult case because of this, all the bad things that keep happening. And again, not necessarily a natural commander.
Well, they're not really her fault either, but she does keep getting hit after hit.
Like, I don't think it would be a pleasant conversation, the Admiralty telling Picard he's going to have a chaperone, essentially. We're going to assign this person to you.
Yeah, I don't think Picard would take that very well at all.
No. Even, I mean, maybe if it was Data.
Maybe.
So in 2370, she hears about Voyager, and she's promoted to captain. So I think they have her in line for it.
Right.
And in 2371, she commands Voyager to go rescue Tuvok. Well, not rescue, but pick up Tuvok from his
Indeed.
sneaky mission with the Maquis.
Yeah. Pull him out of undercover, arrest all the Maquis.
Yeah.
Bam, bam, and we're done.
Done. Should be easy. Good first mission to back on the horse. Which I should also point out, they put her on a new sort of experimental vessel with bioneural circuitry. And the last time she was on an experimental vessel, her family died. Maybe that's not setting her up for success, but... Or maybe it's exactly what she wanted. Maybe she wanted to be back on the horse.
Again, maybe she wanted to confront things. Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah. But yeah, there's
again,
a lot of
going
ambiguity
in
that way.
So, as we see in that mission where she goes down and does it herself, because the first, following the protocol way of doing it, sending down your science awakening stuff didn't work, and she wants to be that person who can then find the better plan, which she normally would want to find first, which is what she always wants to find that better plan.
Yeah.
But is always willing to find a better plan if it arises or presents itself.
Yeah, sometimes better is just more expedient.
Yeah.
In those cases,
True.
you know, when her crew are at stake and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Although she rarely goes for pure expediency.
No, like in Counterpoint, she has her Plan B. Plan B, he was lying to us the whole time, which is what Plan B was all about. Exercise Plan B. And then they go, the telepaths escape through the wormhole, and they blow it up behind them.
Yeah.
She's good like that. But, so, you have Janeway again on this experimental vessel, and again, something goes horribly wrong, and people die, and they're trapped in the Delta Quadrant, and she's responsible for, like, the safety of the Ocampa in a weird way when she gets there, and, like...
Well, and worse, you know, there are injured people on the ship, and all they have is a hologram. You know, it's a really hard
hologram.
landing in the Delta Quadrant. And I can see what you're saying. It's sort of...
First thing he says is, "Where is your doctor?"
Exactly.
Like, that's you, Doc.
What do you want me for? Things must be very bad.
It's like, I'm just a temporary stopgap measure.
But it's, you know, it is in a certain sense her sort of waking nightmare.
Yeah.
Like her worst case scenario is coming true.
She's living her nightmare and then excels anyway. And, like, the reason I kind of draw it back to the Equinox and Ransom, he seems more like the kind of guy who, again, probably wanted to be command the whole time. Maybe has a more romantic notion of this big adventure being lost in the Delta Quadrant. You know, wants to be that Kirk figure, as you say. They probably have this prototypical captain now. You know, he wants to be Pike and Kirk.
Yeah.
What's the other one they always talk about? Is it Captain Aaron who shows up or something like that?
Robert April.
Oh, April, yeah. Robert April, yeah. Those
also
guys.
an early commander of the Enterprise before Pike.
Yeah, right. Right.
And interestingly, captained a ship called the Tiberius.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, could that be the... No, because Kirk's father's name's Tiberius. No, Kirk's grandfather's name's Tiberius. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. These names kind of come and recur and recur and recur. It's interesting, yeah.
Only one Worf, though.
That's true. Yeah.
But there's Data and there's Data.
That's true. Oh.
I know, it's
the
so
second
rude.
season of TNG.
So
man.
rude.
Dr. Jerkface.
So I guess that's my thesis. She has this shaky foundation of horrible traumas that keep happening. On top of that, I don't want to say a quitter, but somebody who's with the tennis thing. Not so much a quitter, but somebody who, like, I see tennis as not fitting into her kind of almost worldview in a way. The science view of things where it's just like, well, that plan didn't work, so I'll just try another, like, I'll do something, like, if, like, you're working on a theory and it fails, like, all your tests come back and it's like, that didn't work. It's like, well, now you don't just kind of keep working on it. Sometimes you just start again from a new theory or a new approach. You can't really do that with tennis. I mean, you can try to get better at it, but that's just practicing. That's just, you know.
Yeah. That's a different kind of method.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can see that tendency to retreat, both working for her and working against her. You know, it can work for her in those moments where she needs to, like, collect herself and, like, literally sit with a cup of coffee in her ready room.
And her vegetable bouillon.
Exactly. And just figure out what's going on. while she just kind of fuels up for a minute, right? Which is really her relationship to food. Like,
Yeah.
coffee is her actual food, and everything else is just fuel.
Yeah, I think the doctor comments on that. It's like,
I think so, yeah.
she's like, my medical, it's all just inconvenient for you. She's just like, give me a hypospace. She's like, okay, but that's not my treatment that I'm prescribing here.
Like, but I've read the textbook. I know
Yeah,
it
she's
will
like,
work.
I know exactly what this will do, and it will work. She's just like, that's for now. Yeah. Worst
She's
patient ever.
Most dangerous kind of patient. Exactly.
Yeah, the one that knows too much.
Yeah.
But that's why she would probably have difficult with a chief science officer almost. I think the chief science officer may feel threatened a bit by the captain.
I know,
or feel like she's stepping on her toes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, imagine if I was like supposed to be chief guitar player on a starship and my like captain was Charlie Christian or somebody, right? I'm sitting there going, I don't know why they'd have a chief guitar officer on a starship, but
Yes, Captain Hendricks.
fuzz face to full. Anyway, mine is a very silly starship.
So, now they're in the Delta Quadrant, and she's living her nightmare. But again, at least with her quantum cosmology and science background, I think it's the way she words it in Night. I think we're really going to come back to this episode a lot. It really is a specifically important Janeway episode.
Let's just set up that episode. I think you're right. It is seminally important. So, just like for like the 2-sentence Netflix setup here, Night is an episode where Voyager's got to cross this void.
Yeah.
With no stars in it, and they think it's going to
take 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. Just total blackness.
Nothing to study.
Everyone's kind of starting to go out of their mind. And in the middle of all this, Captain Janeway has essentially retreated into her quarters in the dark.
Yeah.
And is just kind of stuck there. And Chakotay and Tuvok make efforts to bring her out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the crew hasn't seen you in months. That's something there.
Yeah.
In that void, they have nothing to study. And I believe she comments in that episode that at least for the first, I forget, that episode I think is in season 5 or 6. So she's
Fairly
like,
late on.
Yeah, she's like, for the last 5 years, I had distractions. There were nebulas.
Yeah.
There were the Borg attacking. Like, there was always something going on, and I could distract myself from the situation they're in, but more so her own guilt. Which is what Tuvok says to Chakotay. He's just like, yeah, I've been watching the captain, and guilt has been her constant companion.
For an awful long time.
And I think he's talking about long before Voyager, but in the episode you get the impression he's talking about Voyager, but all the way back from, I think, the Terra Nova.
I could see that, sure. Yeah. Pretty crushing.
Like the
crushing
survivor
traumatic
guilt.
incident.
It starts with that survivor's guilt, you know.
I could see that. And it really, it's plunged her into a very deep depression.
Yeah. Which she suffered before during that year off. She was deeply depressed.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a hole that she's been down into before, and we sort of know that saw about being down in the hole, then you know how to climb your way out. But there are features in the hole that she's in this time that allow us to see things about her character and how she's going to climb out of it that I think are really fascinating. Because she finds a way to project hope in front of herself that is completely novel for her, I think, in that episode. And it's kind of gorgeous. Yeah.
But of course, in that episode, then they find, even in the darkness of the void, there's stuff going on. And they
Absolutely.
save that species from the Malon's toxic ways. Yeah, that's a interesting Janeway moment too, when she's talking to the Malon, and their world produces just unbelievable amounts of industrial waste. So they have a huge, export and dumping industry, shortening all the lives of the crews that do it and everything.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I think
They're all losing their hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
They wear the radiation suits but no helmets, so what's the point?
We're not good at our jobs.
Keeps the heart, I guess, but
Yeah.
it's like a dental vest. I'm going to go hide behind this wall. It's fine. Anyway.
Oh, man.
Sorry, dentists.
We're going to be canceled by
I am not an
dentistry.
anti-dentitist. But that's easy for Federation technology. Like, they deal with
Absolutely.
warp plasmas and everything incredibly toxic and corrosive all the time. So it's like, oh, here, they actually give them the technology on the pad. This will fix all your problems. You won't have any waste, essentially. He's like, this would solve a lot of problems on my world. And unfortunately put me out of business. And he hands it back to her, and her face is just like one of complete incomprehension.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
She's just like,
yeah.
I actually don't understand. Like, this is the science. This is good science.
It's good for you.
And you'll live longer. And so will your kids. And, like, your society will be clean. And, like,
Yeah.
but more so, this is really good science we're giving you here. Like, this is 50 years ahead of your time. Or whatever.
Yeah, I think ethically she's got no way to countenance that.
No. And
How you seriously
scientifically.
do that?
It's just like,
Yeah.
it's like, I hear of new science that works, and I'm just like, yeah, that's awesome. How many episodes does her and B'Elanna get all hyped about some technology, or her and Seven?
Yeah, I mean that's honestly.
I mean,
how
Seven
she and
doesn't get
B'Elanna went to work
hyped.
together.
There's not a lot of hype with Seven.
She won't admit to it anyway. That's for sure.
No, inner hype.
Yeah,
Yeah.
inner hype.
Borg hype.
We are hype.
We are hype. You will be.
Smash to the door. This is so dope. We will assimilate it.
Resistance is futile to the hype.
We are Borg. You cannot stop the hype. Oh man.
Yeah, and I know, Janeway, she sort of does take on that. Once Seven, especially, comes on the ship, she really seems to adopt Seven as like a daughter figure, which she doesn't really do with a lot of the other crew members, like a Harry, for example, or like even a Naomi Wildman or anything. She has her own mother.
Now, does Naomi know about Flaughter before she comes on board Voyager? Is that something Janeway shares with her? Because I think
Janeway was into Flaughter
as a kid.
Now I don't know if I don't know why I felt
But
like
I know that
Neelix
she-
showed it to her,
she
but that
gets
doesn't really make a
pulled.
lot of sense. Or maybe it was Harry. He says he used to love Flaughter and Trevis as well.
But it seems like sort of they're like their Wind in the Willows or
Yeah.
Winnie the Pooh or one of those kind of stories
Yeah.
from childhood, right? But yeah, it's not that she's super aloof from the crew, but she does seem like oddly her primary relationship is with the ship.
Yeah, that very much is the case. I
And I wonder
Those
about
are
the
her two
Terra Nova
strongest
now that
relationships.
you make that point.
maybe.
Whether there isn't a kind of, I wouldn't say transference, but a kind of resonance
Well, I think she
psychologically for her.
maybe
with that.
feels about Voyager that it's the only thing that's kept not just the crew together, but kept them alive, kept her sane, or her from slipping into a
Yeah,
remorse and guilt.
Well,
depression.
into the void herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when they're confronted by her big nemesis, the Borg Queen, both the ship and Seven are in jeopardy.
Yes.
And so she takes it extra personal. And that's a good rivalry. I like that rivalry.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not quite Cisco Ducat level, but it's pretty good.
It really is. Well, and it's interesting, right? Because by the time they're fighting the Borg in that sense, Voyager has really grown into its own collective.
Yeah.
They don't do things exactly by Starfleet regs anymore, but they have their own way.
I mean, they have Borg, Talaxians,
All sorts.
Starfleet Maquis, even Mr. Paris.
Even little Icheb is on board. You know.
Little Itchy.
Yeah. Poor guy.
It doesn't end well, no.
No. But yeah, I mean, and I think the sense of that ship is going to be one that will mark all of those crew members in a way that not every ship does mark its crew. You know, I would find it, if I were Janeway, having gotten back to Earth, and they make her an admiral in fairly short order, I think.
Yep. Admiral in charge of the Borg.
Which is a pretty crazy job.
Now, in Endgame, the future Janeway, she ended up teaching at the academy with Reg.
Interesting. That's right. I forgot all about that.
About the Borg.
Well, she did drive the entire way through their territory.
And then they ask her about 7 of 9. She's just like, I would actually not like to discuss 7 of 9 if you don't mind. We know in that timeline, 7 doesn't make it back. It takes them 23 more years. So it's interesting because they're talking. The Doctor's, of course, married a young lady. And he comments on how maybe Janeway should try it out. Try it out.
Yeah.
Try getting married. And she's like, I think it's a bit late for that. And ha ha ha. But what really is happening is this entire time that they've been back, she's been planning somehow to go back and fix it all.
Right.
Her mission, the Voyager mission, never ended. So she didn't want attachments and a spouse and kids, and I mean, it was just we just hung out with Tuvok, who had lost his mind by that point, and the Doctor, really, Reg.
Yeah.
I mean, Reg is good company.
Well, especially if you're doing science.
Yeah, exactly.
He's pretty great at that.
Yeah. Maybe don't hang out on the holodeck.
Yeah. Keep your holodeck time separate.
I mean, look, he's probably hanging out with Janeway on the holodeck too, but that's not the real Janeway. Oh. What? She's the Maid Marian.
Paging counselor.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, I'll bet with Reg that's one of those things that lives on his medical file, and they say if you note or if he talks about going to the holodeck more frequently, you got to know this is a sign with him that probably there's stressors getting out of control in his life and that he's in a bad place to deal with it.
Well, in that future, that doesn't end up happening. He's come a long way. He doesn't stammer anymore. That's how the Doctor figures him out. He starts stammering. He's like, so? He's just like, I think you know where Janeway is.
Yeah.
And she tells Tuvok, and Tuvok just keeps saying, just like, Janeway's disappearance is still a mystery. They're just like, what? Where did she go? Her disappearance is still a mystery. It's like, but I'm very concerned. He keeps saying. He's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's very funny.
There is a
She walks in. He's just like, I know you. She's like, yes, I'm your friend, Kathryn. You're an imposter. Janeway comes on Saturdays. Today is Thursday. She's like, I know, but I had something to talk to you about. She's just like,
oh, man.
The Doctor visits on Tuesdays. Mr. Barclay's visits are erratic. but he never thinks he's an imposter because this is just Barclay.
Oh.
But of course, it's all very sad, and she wants to go back and fix everything, and it seems like a crazy move, and like maybe out of character, and it's not her essentially. It's a future version of her that doesn't come to be.
Yeah.
But it's very in line with the Janeway character, and it's very in line with the Tuvik's decision as well. Even though circumstances have, ended up a certain way, but she's not willing to accept that yet. It doesn't matter the length of time. I mean, with Tuvik's, it was a long enough time for him to be
I think he's
a
around
real
for
being.
a few weeks.
Yeah,
anyway.
like quite a long time.
Yeah.
Long enough to
get attached.
Yeah, or like to respect him as an individual, as a new entity, a new life.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the Voyager crew. I wonder if old Janeway meets young Janeway, and young Janeway seems to feel like they have nothing in common and stuff. Old Janeway drinks tea, and the look young Janeway has when she's like, I only drink tea now. She's just like. That's when she starts to think she's like a faker, species 8472, and the old Janeway's just like, I know what you're thinking. You think I'm species 8472. It's like, I used to be you. I know what you'd be thinking. But I think it was a great ending to that series and a great ending for that character. I think it all made perfect sense. I think all those decisions make perfect sense. Like the character gets a lot of flack for the Tuvik's decision, and even the endgame stuff, like changing everyone's timeline. For her own benefit, quote unquote. But it fits with all of the trauma that she's suffered early in her career, and still her whole career. It was always just horrible. And she just wanted to stop that from happening. She doesn't give up on that idea. She's that scientist. She's just like, no, it takes time to develop a theory or a new science, but you got to give us the science time. She always wants that science time.
Yeah.
And if that's 30 years while she teaches at the academy or whatever, then so be it.
And it's an idea that both the series tried out before, but that the crew had thought about already. in the episode, is it Timeless? Where
Timeless is an episode, yeah.
Kim and Chakotay come back to the Delta Quadrant.
Oh, yeah.
Chased
Yep,
by
that is Timeless.
Geordie LaForge.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In I think a Galaxy class starship. And
it must have been like a...
or refit Galaxy, I would assume.
Yeah.
But he's chasing them, trying to get them to stop. They're trying to go back, manipulate backward in time to send a message so that Voyager won't be lost and crash into the ice, which means that Harry Kim and Tom Paris know this.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be in a report. That's going to be in the log. That's going to be in the discussion in...
If they put it there. It's Harry.
Harry's going to put it
Harry
there.
put it in there.
After the Thing incident.
Yeah, okay.
I think he's putting that in.
Oh, the Thing incident.
There's a thing, Captain.
Captain, there's a thing outside. Oh my god, and they revisit that in Endgame, actually, with old Janeway and him. Where, what is the line? Yeah, it's, God, I'm losing it now, but it's they have a quick conversation because he beams onto her shuttle. Oh yeah, he's going over her science or something. He calls something a thing, and she's just like, a thing? It's something like that. It was hilarious. It was a crazy callback. I thought I was the only one who noticed that Harry screwed up on the first day, but apparently so did the writers, and I like that.
So did Janeway.
Janeway did for sure. That's why he never got 7 status in her heart.
That's true. But yeah, I mean, I think she knows about that as a possibility somehow from that story. And so I can imagine that it's a kind of an ace in the hole. And she's got 23 years to think about it.
Yeah.
Well, 19 or whatever, even when in the series it happens. But,
yeah.
It's a long time.
Well,
and then it would have been 20, 30 years after that, right?
I don't know how long it was after that, actually. But, well, no, it couldn't have been that long. She's not that old. I mean, if she was in her 40s, there's probably like another 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Yes, it is 10 because they're celebrating the 10th
that.
anniversary at the start of that episode of Voyager coming back.
So it would have been 30-some years. Yeah, she'd be in her early 70s then.
Yeah. I hope I formed a decent thesis and then...
Well, honestly, I think you pursued it very well. It enriched my sense of who she is as a character. I hadn't had those background experiences that can so make sense of someone's behavior. Even if it's not what I would do, I can absolutely see how she gets to that point.
I don't think she's ever written inconsistently. And I think she's just acted impeccably. I don't think she misses a note. But, Kate Mulgrew is a known amazing actress.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Real chicken Kiev. A little red for you there at the end. Anything else you want to say, Dave?
Well, I suppose it's funny now that I think about it. Old Janeway comes back to rescue sort of younger Janeway, and now there's a statue of Kathryn Janeway in Bloomington, Indiana. I know I've said it before that Star Trek is kind of like the fiction that calls itself into reality.
Yeah.
But there are moments when,
one of the reasons we love it.
Vulcan, Alberta, and Bloomington, Indiana, and other places.
Scotty Ashers are in space.
Right? And, it makes me hopeful that even though we're on a pretty shaky foundation right now, we may be able to excel despite the circumstances too.
Well put.
Thank you. End transmission.